And then we do community programs like this one. So, and that's squarely in Susie's wheelhouse. She's our director of community programs. And so it is with great pleasure that I get to work with this amazing storyteller, this amazing writer. She is the princess of poop, which she might tell you more about. And she has just recently written a book that she's going to tell you about tonight. And
all right, perfect. Hi, everybody. Now we can get down to business. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight to hear me talk about the importance of everyday wild animals in our lives. And tonight's talk is the why behind my new book for kids called The Animal Adventurer's Guide: How to Prowl for an Owl, Make Snail Slime, and Catch a Frog Barehanded. I'm excited to share with you what was in my heart and my head when I sat down to write this book, which is actually filled with what my colleague Janet Altabello would describe the gold. So the book is filled with the gold, meaning it's what we do as naturalists. We put in our bag of tricks. I put it all down in the book, and it all came from the Harris Center and other places that I worked. And so I'm just so grateful to have had this job here for almost 30 years. And today I'm going to share my treasure trove with all of you, but it's really, this part tonight is about the why. And when I was really thinking about how I would introduce myself tonight, I thought I would start off by telling you what animals I am affiliated with this evening. So these are the animals that are kind of in my heart today. And it changes every day because I'm an animal lover, and being an animal lover, I have lots of different animals that I just adore, but today I'm feeling a lot like a river otter, kind of playful, and it was very wet out, so slippery, I guess. A little bit like a bumblebee, being very busy and determined and focused. I have a little bit of fox in me this evening, fox for my adaptability and flexibility. When my power went out, I made a change, and always a little bit like a turtle. Turtle's probably always with me. I'm a real homebody, and that's sort of my heart of who I am. And now I'm going to ask you in the chat to put down tonight what animal you are feeling most like. So you can just share it right in the chat, and you can put a little reason why if you want. You can just put the animal that pops into your head. I always like to say it's the animal who you would want to be right this minute. Maybe it's a monkey or a butterfly, a puffin or a shark. And we'll just see if there's anybody putting anything in the chat. Good, there's some people adding some things to the chat. An otter, I see a rose-breasted grosbeak, a turtle, a snow leopard, wow, a bird, my dog, a frog and a tortoise, a beaver, a raven, an otter. Yeah, we can have a whole otter pod. Oh, Charlotte feels like a monkey and a butterfly. I know that feeling. I felt those before. Giraffe. We could go on. You don't have to share if you don't want to. I like that Linda put a sloth. She's feeling lazy. Let's just take a minute and think about what animals we did put in, and just think about, when you look at that list in the chat, are you seeing a lot of mammals, reptile? Did anybody want to be a snake? Anybody choose to be a trout or a salmon, a toad, a bird like Miles did, a rose-breasted grosbeak? Or maybe some of you were thinking about being an invertebrate like a slug or a snail, who knows? And I like to start here. I kind of like to start with that because it's just a different way of introducing ourselves. And now that we've introduced the animal inside of us, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself as a person. This is just a collage of who I am. I grew up in Brooklyn and always had dachshunds as pets. I was really lucky because in the summers, my family would go to Vermont, and that's me on the beach in Vermont, where I spent lots of time just loving it. And when I was in Brooklyn, I spent a lot of time looking in the cracks, the sidewalks, and between the buildings. I also was really lucky. I spent time at the Museum of Natural History, When I was growing up, Sundays were free for New York residents, and my parents being school teachers, they never had a lot of money, so they were always looking for free things for families to do. And the American Museum of Natural History was a monthly stop for us. It's really where I just saw a greater world of nature. And one time, my parents took me to Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, which is in Queens, New York. And you can look out across this incredible wetland, this coastal wetland, and against it is the skyline, the New York City skyline. And I remember waiting in line for like hours, it felt like, lots of people in the line. And I got up to a bird blind because there was a snowy owl visiting. And the snowy owl had its back to everybody. But when I peeked through the little slit in the blind, the owl turned its head and it felt like it looked right at me. And after that, after I kind of locked eyes with the yellow eyes of this amazing visitor, I became completely animal obsessed. And I worked towards that. I looked at all the animals I could find. In college, I got an internship with the Central Park Conservancy. I worked my summers with Math Audubon, and eventually I graduated from Barnard College with a degree in English literature with a focus on environmental literature. And it didn't take me long to find myself at the Harris Center. I started at the Harris Center in 1991 as a camp counselor with Wolf's Nest. And some of you out there might have had kids that went to Wolf's Nest, or remember, maybe you went there yourself. I might have been your camp counselor, but the Harris Center has really been where I found myself. It's given me incredible opportunities. I got to hold a baby bear. I know this picture is a little hard to see, but I got to bottle feed a baby bear. I get to spend my days with kids of all ages and people of all ages. And for me, one of my best parts of working here is working with Mead Ketto, who was the director when I first started. He's really my mentor. He got me really excited about scat, and that's how I became the Princess of Poop, because I became really into it. Really, if you think about it, scat can show you so much about an animal, what it ate. It's really true. This little saying that us naturalists know, which goes like this: if you really want to know what an animal eats, take a good hard look at what it excretes. There's so much cool information. The whole food chain can be unlocked by spending time looking at something that most people would find kind of gross, but I find really cool. And I should tell you, I have 3 kids. It's a picture of them: my son Liam, my daughter Lily, and my youngest son David. And they've had to put up with a lot growing up with a naturalist as a mom, always bringing home scat. People leave me very strange things on my doorsteps, skulls, parts of animals. I get phone calls in the middle of the night about somebody finding an injured bird and can I help them? But all of them have grown up loving nature and the natural world. And all of this experience and life work went into this book that I wrote called The Animal Adventurer's Guide: How to Prowl for an Owl, Make Snail Slime, and Catch a Frog Barehanded. It's 50 activities to get wild with animals. And it is filled, it's a guide. And I want to talk tonight about why I felt moved to write this. It has to do with our experience with the natural world, our experience with all the animals that make up this world. And I have just been the hugest animal lover. I like all the animals that people don't like. I'm a big fan of the things that are that have bad reputations: snakes, fisher, star-nosed mole, poisonous shrews, things like that. But I have to say that I feel that we as humans seem to have a natural affinity for animals. We reach out to them. We want to connect to them. We look for them. We keep them as pets. We put them on our bodies as tattoos. We want to meet them and come to know them. And the wilder they are, kind of the more thrilling. But tonight I'm going to be talking about all the wild animals that are right outside our back door. I like to think of this guy. This is E.O. Wilson. It's a drawing, a portrait by him. He's a famous thinker, an ant scientist, and he came up with a groundbreaking theory called biophilia, which some of you might have heard heard of. He worked on it with Stephen Keller, and he put forth this idea that humans have an innate affinity to want to connect with other forms of life, and that this urge is actually hardwired into us. Think about it. It kind of makes sense. It would have meant our own survival. If we weren't aware of animals around us, we wouldn't have survived. It's part of our human history. It's what makes us human, our attention to the animals around us. He suggests that this curiosity and this instinctive desire to connect with animals and the natural world has enabled us to survive to the present time. This has actually been studied, and where we see it studied most is not in biophilia, which means the love of living things, but in biophobia, our fear of living things. So you might, this slide might make some of you squeamish, people who feel anxious about snakes or spiders. I should have given you a warning, but I'm putting it up here on purpose because we are wired to be hypersensitive to these animals, to pay attention to them. I didn't include, but think of the stinging bees, their black and yellow color. And think about when we see the color yellow for our street signs, it's a warning sign. It's like, watch out, yield, something's coming, slow down. We even have that red, when you think about animals that have red, when a snake opens its mouth and it's red inside and it's looking venomous, our stop signs are red. We are still using these cues to warn us of danger. This instinct is encoded in us, according to Stephen Keller and E.O. Wilson. And it is what we carry forward into our very beings. And it has other ways that it manifests itself, like the fact that many of us like to have lawns with a tree in the middle of it. That's like our savanna. That's a landscape perspective suggesting that's why we keep our lawns the way we do, that it's sort of a hearkening back to where we found safety, which was in open grasslands and up in trees. For an animal connection, we are connected to our dogs and our cats. They've been constant companions for thousands of years. They are considered part of our pact. And I've heard it suggested that nature doesn't need people, which is probably really true. But I'd like to suggest that people really, really need nature. And there's a lot of studies coming out about this. If you are interested, you can find studies that show time in nature reduce your cortisol level, that's your stress hormone, that it reduces your blood pressure, that it gets you focused, that it opens your creativity. These are all things that are important to us as human beings. And perhaps we haven't been spending enough time in it. And I'll just give you my prescription. If you're feeling worried and anxious, spend some time outside and reset yourself. And I'd like to suggest something even further than this, something that went into my book. I have spent 30 years teaching children and adults. And something that I've really noticed is that when we are outside, we're really drawn to animals. That's often what we focus on. We want to spend time having close-up and personal connections with them. Some of us even spend part of our childhood and maybe even some of our adulthood actually wanting to be an animal. We have time when, as children and even as adults, we develop a sense of family with the animals around us by observing and interacting and even becoming wild animals. We can connect deeply and develop a sense of connection and caring for our animal compatriots. Children and lots of adults just want to be the animals they love. For young children, there is a time in their life when they believe they actually are the animals they love. I've seen this firsthand with my own kids. My daughter, who I don't have a picture of, this isn't my daughter, I wish it was. I never took a picture of her, but I'm not joking you, she spent a year of her childhood as a cat. I had to talk to her in cat language, meow, meow, Lily. She asked me to feed her on the floor. She wanted cat toys for presents. She really lived as a cat. And my older son, he'd be really embarrassed, but I have to tell you this, when I asked him at the age of 5 what he thought he might want to be when he grew up, he thought about it for a while, and then he said a robin redbreast. He just wanted to be a bird, and the robin was what he wanted. When I tell him that story now, he said, oh, I wish I had said an eagle. But no matter what, he just wanted to be the animal. When children are allowed time and afforded the opportunity to play into the role of being the animal that they love, they're not only play acting, this is what I think, but they're trying on the skin, the feathers, the fur of the animal. And this very act is essential in the development of a child's empathy and compassion. When a young child can live in the skin of another animal, it not only gives them a chance for all the positives, those social emotional benefits of pretend play, it also gives them a chance to fall in love with the animal they're pretending to be and develop a deep connection to the animals of this world. A young child can develop a profound sense of self as a chipmunk and feel as though his or her brothers and sisters are the chipmunks in the yard. We might think this is so cute and so sweet. And look at this little girl right here. She looks adorable, but I actually think it's essential. It forges the beginning of an environmental identity, a future steward, and a new generation of conservationists. If you think about what memoirist and nature writer Brenda Peterson had to say, she wrote, "In all of our environmental wars, the emphasis has been on saving species, not becoming them." And I like this idea. I like the idea of us standing in the act of being an animal, having their claws, their paws, their wings, their shells, their fins. When given this opportunity, it's hard not to see them as the sentient beings that they are, whether they're an ant or a whale. And if you consider further what the author and place-based educator David Sobel wrote, he said, if we aspire to developmentally appropriate science education, the first task is to become the animal, to understand them from the inside out before we even ask children to know the animal or even save them. So, we are warned about anthropomorphizing, and that's probably what some of you are thinking. This sounds a little bit like Susie saying we should anthropomorphize and be the animal. And I know it isn't scientific and it is inaccurate. And I get that. I totally understand it. But I think that it has its place. I want to say that I think it's a good starting place, and maybe it's a good keeping place too. We are animal with animal. Children do not differentiate. And maybe we shouldn't either, because all this time disciplining ourselves against seeing animals through our very human gaze, maybe it hasn't been so good in the long run. Perhaps it's led us to treat animals as commodity, as possession, as a resource for our own use, as something other than animal, something other. We're animals, something other than us, instead of seeing them as kin or part of who we are and part of where we come from. And really, who has been telling us all this time not to anthropomorphize? Well, all along the gaze of the scientists, the establishment, they cannot escape their own biases. All this time, when I was growing up, for example, female birds were not considered very exciting, right? They don't sing as much. They don't have flashy colors. They're just kind of dull, and they were ignored by, I might add, the mostly white male scientists who were studying them, right? But as it recently turns out, as ornithology is diversifying, female birds are being studied now by scientists, probably a lot of female scientists. And what they're finding is that female birds actually have a lot to offer. They just never were studied. So I guess I'm getting off topic, but what I'm saying is that we can't fool ourselves to think that we don't anthropomorphize, even as scientists. There is always something in us when we're gazing at another animal that is through our very own animal lens. So Rachel Carson, in her groundbreaking book, A Sense of Wonder, had it right when she said, play incorporating animistic and magical thinking is important because it fosters the healthy, creative, and emotional growth of a child and fosters empathy and wonder. And I have to ask you to think about what David Sobel, who has been a teacher of mine, and he's the place-based education advocate, he said this to me. It's not in any of his books, but he's repeated it to me. He says, it's not the 100 facts about nature that actually change a person. It is the one experience in nature when we feel connected and part of nature that's transformative. And I know this, I've seen this. I know it from working with people of all ages for the past 30 years, that often these transformational nature experiences are connected to the animals that we share this world with. And they don't have to be like the bear or the eagle or the whale or those charismatic creatures. They can be something small like a turtle or a blue jay. So in my book, The Animal Adventurer's Guide, I write in the prologue, before I get into all the activities, this is what I say. The small things in nature, the things we can hold, touch, or lie down next to and watch closely, these are the things that open our hearts. These are what remind us of our connection to one another. When we stretch out a gentle finger in invitation to the snail, the worm, the caterpillar, the dragonfly, we know that we are both alive in this very moment together. And I just want to say that after all, the toad is no less wild than the tiger, and the toad is right outside your door. So start small and think local. And I know all of you have heard that saying before, think global, act local, buy local, love where you live. But I would just suggest that we extend this idea to the wild animals that make up our everyday world and our neighborhoods. These are our wild neighbors, and we have so much to learn from them, to coexist with them, to be curious about them, to notice them. They are full of their own lives. Look at them with the beginner's eye. And instead of just forgetting to see them because we see them every day, stop and really look at them. You've all heard of slow eating, and now there's a thing called slow birding. I'm going to say, slow it all down and be a slow outside person. Slow it down. Take notice of what you see. Visit with the creatures in your community the same way you might visit with a neighbor. Invite yourself to lean in to the very everyday wild creatures you find. Open up all your senses and let your heart stretch out and put out your hand. Who knows what might end up in it? And don't forget our constant companions, our dogs and cats. They have something to share with us as well. Each of them still hold a sliver of wild, or else why would they still eat compost and bring home half-eaten mice to leave on your doorstep? We are convinced that our pets have emotional lives, right? Our dogs miss us when we leave, and our cats purr when they're content. If we can see that our pets have emotional lives, then doesn't it make sense that other animals would have the same capacity? Which reminds me to invite you to step into your own imagination and let your heart and spirit become an animal just for a minute, or even a whole day, or maybe a lot of your life. After all, we're all animals too, and the animals around us are our very kin. In a world where kids and adults are spending more time with a phone in their hand than a frog in their hand, we are losing something of ourselves, 100%. More screens that block our view, interrupt our physical connection, and make us all feel like we know about nature without even putting a foot into it. Are we moving away from biophilia and into a new world of videophilia? I hope not, right? Today, I want all of you to hope not too. And I want you to dig right in. This isn't just about kids. It's about us as humans. And I have some advice to leave you with. And this is from the last paragraph in my book. Oh, the last paragraph in the prologue in my book. I say, stop and open your eyes. Shift your perception. There are wild animals all around us almost every moment of every day. Whether it's hearing a blue jay's call or catching little brown toads, everyday creatures are waiting to wake up your curiosity and wonder. Start small and think local. We have everything we need in our own neighborhoods to get started falling in love with this world and what it has to offer. So that's a little bit about my book. I know it's just sort of short. If you guys have questions, I'm more than happy to answer questions, comments that you might want to share. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if there's anything anybody wants to say, or if Miles, you've got any questions for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Susie. Susie, your passion is really shining through when you speak about this stuff. It's great. So a couple of questions. One, why don't we start out with Violet's question? Violet, would like to know a little bit more about owls. She's 8 years old. She's tuning in.
Yay.
What is your favorite fact about owls
Oh my
you might be
gosh.
able to share?
Violet, that is so hard for me to say because I love so much about owls. But I think one of the coolest things, and I remember learning this when I was your age, actually, when I saw that snowy owl, is owls' eyes are so big. There's no room for muscles. So owls actually cannot move their eyes. It's almost like somebody dropped super glue in them and they're just like frozen in their head. So if you can't move your eyes and you're an owl, you developed and evolved to be able to move your head. And that's why owls can move their head 270 degrees. So what does that look like? They move their head from the front to the shoulder. They can actually turn their head completely around to the back and look behind them all the way to their other shoulder. But they cannot turn their head completely around. I'd like to say if they could, their head would fall off. So the reason people thought they could turn their head completely around is that they can move their head super fast from one direction to the other, and they can rotate their head up really high. They can kind of almost look behind them that way too. So Violet, that's one of my favorite things about owls. And if you love owls as much as I love owls, I think you're going to have a very owly evening in your future.
Thanks for that, Susie. We have people that are curious about the book itself. Do you have a copy there that you might be able to hold up?
I do. I have a copy here. Oh,
and what is the best way to use the book if we were going to approach it?
So great. Well, I actually think the book is for 5 to 9-year-olds, but I'm going to tell you what, I actually think it's for everybody. Of course, I say that because I wrote it, but I mean, everything in here an adult could do too. It's divided up into animal sections. So each animal group has its own page, its own kind of chapter. And there's activities. There's do-it-yourself, like for Violet, who loves owls. I have a do-it-yourself owl collar made out of a soda can. I have make your own binoculars for somebody who's young and can't use the focus knob. It's too much. They're just made out of toilet paper tubes. So there's lots of do-it-yourself activities. There's activities that are really getting you outside to slow down. There's a spy on the flower to see who comes visit the flowers. There's a lot of sneaking up on a bird. How close can you get to a robin? Really a lot of observation. So what I would say is, you could use this book in so many ways. If you're a teacher, you could use it as ideas for your classroom. If you're a parent and your kids are home during, vacation, you could spend your day being an animal adventurer. If you're a grown-up, you just and you love animals as much as me, you might want this book just to do some of the things in here, like make a toad haul or follow your nose, or make some snail slime. Things like that. So that would be my suggestion. And if anybody does anything from the activity and they want to share it with me, I would love that. I've already had a few people send me photos of their toad hauls that they've made. Somebody made binoculars and sent me a picture of that. I'm all about it. So let me see what you can discover.
Great. And the best way to send those to you is by email, or should we tag you in our Instagram?
You can do it both ways. Thanks, Miles. You can email me directly at the Harris Center, and Miles can put that in the chat for you. You can post it up on social media and give me a shout out. That would be awesome. And you can even just give me a call at the Harris Center and leave me a message if you want to share something really exciting that happened.
Very cool. And following up on that, what would be the best way? There's two scenarios here. If I live in the Monadnock region, where should I pick up the book? Or if I live in California, where should I buy the book?
Such a great question. You can buy the book if you're in the Monadnock region from our local Toadstool bookshop. They have it, but you can also purchase it right from the Harris Center. And you can leave me a message and I can sign it for you with any message that you want inside of it. And the Harris Center, the book is $17.95, and at the Harris Center we're selling it for $20, but the additional money goes to support the Harris Center's mission. So you can check it out at our, Miles might put that in the chat too, where you can purchase it from there. If you don't live local, You can still order it from the Harris Center and we can send it to you, but it also is available on Amazon, or you could ask your local independent bookstore to get it and carry it because it's such a good book. Those are my answers.
Awesome. Those are great
Welcome.
answers. You mentioned that you get these calls in the middle of the night about injured birds. Who should we actually call if we find an injured bird?
I know, this is such a good question. I do get this call a lot. I mean, and I appreciate it because I always like to know, are the birds okay? But the best thing to do is to call Maria Colby from Wings of Dawn. She's our local and rehabilitator. She is incredible. She is 24/7. She'll take your call at 3 a.m. She'll go out and get the animal. She doesn't just do birds. She does every animal you could think of. And you can find her number on the New Hampshire Fish and Game's website, where they have a wildlife rehabilitators page with her listed. And if you don't live local to the Monadnock region, they do list some other rehabilitators across the area. So yeah, that's a good question.
Fantastic. Yeah, we get that. We get those calls all the time at the Harris Center. And you mentioned a lot about instinct. Where do you think your instincts to write came from, and specifically write this book?
Oh, wow. I love that question. It's gonna make me cry a little bit because I had a dream of always being a writer. That was my intention. I was an English literature major. I focused on environmental literature, and I really wanted to be a writer, but it's hard to make a living as a writer. So I got sidetracked into becoming a naturalist. And in a way, I feel like that was a perfect sidetrack for me because it kind of went into my heart as like a broth that's been brewing in there for a while. And now what's coming out is this book, and I write often for magazines like Northern Woodlands, and I'm actually working on 2 other books. One of them is about to hopefully get published. I don't have any more information because things are still under secret contract, but it took me a long time to act on my dream. I had that dream from when I was about 6 years old. I would write stories. I have notebooks full of all my fairy tales that I wrote. I just always loved the written word. I've been a big reader my whole life. I love being read to. And I think that being a naturalist, I use books with children a lot, nature books with children a lot. And I would get this feeling when I'd read one like, wow, why didn't I write that? I could have written that book, but it's harder than you think. So it takes a lot of grit and determination. I spend a lot of my weekends just writing. I tuck right in. But as I admitted, I'm sort of a turtle and I like being at home, and writing is sort of my comfort zone. So I think that's a great question. Thank you for asking it.
Yeah, you bet, Susie. You mentioned that sometimes kids will act like animals, and just if you want, I can edit that part out about Liam if he doesn't want that to be in the program.
Oh, he's okay. We call him Robin Redbreast now and then, just to keep it real.
Do you have any tips for the parents of those kids? Do we encourage them, or do we say, that's not normal?
No, I just think you should just let them live like that. I mean, I just think, having pretend play, especially in that kind of preschool age, is very natural. Some kids love to pretend to be like a police officer or a veterinarian. Around our house, when my older kids were growing up, we had a lot of options of things they could be, just a big costume box. And in the costume box were tails and ears and snouts. And we made stuff. And, I loved it because I felt like it gave me a way of looking at my child. Especially my Lily, who wanted to be a cat, she would behave differently as a cat than she would as a person. She was a lot more affectionate as a cat than she was as a kid. And I just think, she was experimenting with what she was being, and being an animal was really comfortable for her. So I'm all about that. We didn't always feed her on the floor or give her just milk and kitty kibbles. She never ate kitty kibbles, but she wanted to eat things that looked like kitty kibbles. so we just went with it when it felt like appropriate. And sometimes we'd say this isn't a place for a cat to go. This is a place for a girl to go. And she usually listened, not always. I see that her dad is on this call tonight. He's probably cracking up. Lots of great memories.
Those are really good tips, and I guess you can learn a lot by experimenting like that. So it is completely normal.
It is.
I just have two other questions here.
Sure.
One is, you mentioned about public policy and how it's kind of been shaped by some gender stereotypes. Do you have any public policies that you think ought to be looked at a little bit more closely, or have some energy put into them to maybe change or improve upon?
Such a good question. I don't know so much about public policies, but what I do feel really strongly is that the more that we can diversify our people working in this field, environmental field, whether it's research or journalism or writers or educators, and the more that we can have different voices and different people at the table, that's just going to be better for everyone, because it's, for a long time our world has been really seen through, and I don't want to insult anybody, but it's the truth, through the white man's gaze. And now, it's so good that things are beginning to shift, that we're aware of that, and that we can have new eyes coming in, and we're going to need all the eyes that we can at the table, because we have a lot of problems ahead of us, and we need out of the box thinking, because the inbox thinking hasn't worked so far. So I'm all for opening the tent as wide as we can and getting as many different people from all different backgrounds and all different places right at the table. And I just this week I did a class. So I was invited to do a class for Cornell University environmental education class. And it was over 200 people, and they were from all over the world. And I just found that so heartening for me, that there were people asking me questions from Nigeria and China and Costa Rica. I just, that just felt like the right things to be happening. So
Great. We'll all take that to heart and move that forward,
yeah.
Diversify. So yeah, we just have one more question, so we might end a little early. We started our questions with learning something about owls, which was really cool. Lisa asked, can you tell us a few cool things that make you love fishers?
Oh my gosh, I have a whole hour-long presentation. That presentation won't end early. The fisher is so maligned. It is blamed for so many things. And really all that it is a fabulous predator. It is so good at its job. When somebody in our world is really good at a job, we give them like awards and medals and pay raises. But when the fisher is so good at its job, it gets a bad reputation. But here's a couple of cool facts about fisher. First of all, fisher can rotate their hind legs 180 degrees, like we can rotate our wrists, and that makes the fisher able to climb down a tree head first, right? Because it can put those back legs out and hold onto the tree, just like a squirrel, which is usually what it's trying to eat when it's up the tree. So I just think that's an incredible adaptation, to be able to go head first down a tree. So that's one cool thing. Another cool thing is fisher are really one of the only animals that do eat porcupines. And you might think that's a strange thing for an animal lover like me to say, yay, eat the porcupines. But I mean, everything is in balance, and the fisher has its role. And one of its jobs is, when it lives in areas where porcupines live, it will eat the porcupine. And think about how dangerous that is. Porcupines are so well protected. So with all those quills, you might wonder how they do it. And I'm going to tell you, but if I ever do my demystifying fisher talk, you'll have to sign up to hear more about fisher. But fisher will chase a porcupine up a tree. That's where they go when they feel the safest. And then the fisher is very acrobatic. It's agile. It kind of can jump around the tree and snap at the porcupine. The porcupine does not have any quills on its snout, so it's trying to snap at the snout. And the porcupine backs up and it backs up and it backs up. And remember, it's in a tree. And eventually it falls right out of the tree and falls down and injures itself, and often falls on its back where its belly does not have any quills. That's just one way that a fisher eats a porcupine. You'll have to come to my fisher talk, and I guess I'll have to do the fisher talk this winter to find out the other way that it can eat a fisher. So I want to just thank everybody for showing up tonight, and I'm very happy to take any questions. Feel free to email me at the Harris Center. And I just say, get outside. It's not, kids aren't the only ones who can be animal adventurers. All of us, every single one of us here has an animal adventure in us just waiting to come right out. So bring it out and enjoy it. So that's all.
Thanks so much, Susie. Fantastic.
Thank you.
We can't wait for your book to spread far and wide so more people can get a taste of that.
Great. Thank you.